what do you say to people who claim debates are sin? Because Romans 1, everything in there's bad, and debates mentioned. What do you say to those people?
That's a really good question. I'm glad you asked it because I kind of want to put that one to bed. It is a good question.
Mm-hmm.
Firstly, I will. Well, what you said about private conversations, those are good because people's guards are down.
Right.
When you're in the middle of a debate, it is kind of like a sport. You don't want to come in as the one who looks like they lost the debate. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is, unfortunately, there could be a little pride in the public arena, more competitiveness than if you're having a private talk. And so although I haven't seen anybody convert mid-debate, I have seen over the last 3 or 4 years many instances of people that had one position 3 to 4 years ago and even debated a specific position, and now 3 to 4 years later they have the opposite position because of debates. But that was a process, like you said, it took them a few years. I've seen a lot of people who were anti-Trinitarian, who held to either oneness or modalism or one of these false views of the nature of God. They're now Trinitarian because of debates. I've seen a lot of people who are a strict post-trib, right? The rapture's after the seals, trumpets, and vials, rather than just after the seals. They are now pre-wrath because of debate. So it's not like it's this major conversion, but it's still changes that I'm seeing within our own camp. And I've seen people actually admit that they're wrong in open mic discussions, where it's a little bit more laid back, a little bit informal. And I've seen people admit, okay, it looks like my position's erroneous. With the formal debate, though, it's a little more competitive, and pride can set in, unfortunately. And so how that relates to your question on what would I say to people who claim debates are a sin based on Romans 1 is, well, firstly, Romans 1 is to unbelievers. It's about the downward spiral an unbelieving, unregenerate person can take to where they've now been rejected, given up, given over to a reprobate mind. And so this list described at the end of Romans 1, correct me if I'm wrong, that's where it says being filled with, and then it'll say all unrighteousness, haters of God, full of debate is one of them, implacable. So interpretation wise, that is referring to a reprobate. Application wise, a lot of these single independent sins can apply to non-reprobates, and specifically the reprobate. They're implacable. Nothing can convince them. They're not willing to even hear another side and judge that side objectively. They're full of debate. They're not interested in engaging people in an honest and open-minded way. The passage even says that they're disobedient to parents, which tells me that they are full of debate in the entirety of their life, even with their parents, right? So they're certainly not interested in a professional discussion on important matters like we typically do in the panel discussions and debates. And so I would argue that debate is not necessarily sinful, but strife is. And that's what I see with a lot of these reprobates is, rather than healthy and meaningful dialogue or debate, it's strife. They're contentious. When it comes to debating, though, or apologetics, 1 Peter 3 says we are called to defend the faith and have a defense for the hope that is in us, right? This is where we get apologetics from. We're just defending the faith, defending Christianity. 2 Corinthians 10:5 tells us to cast down imaginations, or some Bible translations even just translate that as destroy arguments that are against the knowledge of God. We're told to contend for the faith. Paul debated, right? He engaged the Hellenistic Jews in, I think it's Acts 9. And it says Paul disputed with the heathen, with the Grecians, I think it was. And so basically this is Paul essentially debating with them. He's disputing with them. And so my question to somebody who would say debate is just automatically a sinful thing, how can debate be a bad thing? Paul wrote Romans 1. He's the one who wrote that list, being filled with full of debate, right? And that's the chapter people are looking to to say that debates are automatically sinful and wrong, but Paul himself disputed in the book of Acts. And so why would Paul be condemning that which he is doing as he defends the one true God against the Gentiles?
Yeah.
And so long answer short, I guess, debate is it's not sinful as long as it doesn't become contentious, as long as it doesn't cause strife, as long as we're not consumed with debate. We're debating our parents. We're disobedient. We're not really interested in truth. We're just interested in arguing to argue. And so that's where I think it can become sin. And even if there's somebody who just doesn't want to debate, but you're just constantly in their face, like, let's debate, come on, challenging them over and over again, I think that could be borderline consumed with debate. And I guess, Pastor, I'd be curious as to your thoughts on, and you gave a good sermon on this, actually.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, so for example, the Bible says not a brawler, okay? Not a striker. So does that mean a pastor couldn't get into boxing? I mean, or wrestling or something. Isn't that a fight? Isn't that what we call it? But there's a big difference between a couple of guys agreeing to, hey, let's come together and for a sport, for fun, to challenge ourselves. Let's have a fight. We'll have a referee. That's not like a guy who's going around just getting in fights with people who don't want to fight. You know what I'm saying? He's going around picking fights. I don't think we ought to go around. There's some people that I know that I love and they love me, and they don't want to argue with me about this stuff. And so I shouldn't go trying to debate them. I shouldn't be bringing things up all the time and just trying to get into an argument. That's what it means to be being full of debate. But if there's somebody that wants, so the thing is, we call the things you do a debate, like we call a boxing match a fight. Okay. It's not like, it's a different thing. And so, a lot of preachers I've heard that act like debate's a sin, they actually do a lot of debating themselves. They'll do it where, somebody makes a YouTube video, they'll respond with a YouTube video and they make responses back and forth. Well, how is that not debating? That's just a foolish way to debate, where you can keep straw manning the other guy, you can keep representing, where you have no accountability. So the thing is, what's the difference? Or some guys debate from pulpits. One guy will preach a sermon against this person, and then they'll preach a sermon against that person. Some guys literally have debates from their pulpits. Yeah. And to me, in a much more ungodly way than, and they'll call it contending for the faith, all that. But again, I wish people, if they just weren't interested in that format, were just like, I just don't want to do them, and I get that. Okay. Hey, I don't feel like getting punched in the face, so I'm not into boxing. I don't want to do it, and it would be wrong for somebody. No, fight me. Now that guy, they're a brawler, they're a striker. I don't want to fight, and so if somebody doesn't want to have a debate, I don't think we ought to push them to. I don't think we ought to be like, oh, you're scared. I'm going to tear you up and taunt them. I think that's a bad attitude. But if two people want to get together like gentlemen, I think we call that a debate, like we call a boxing match a fight and brawling. Right. And I don't think boxing is a sin. I don't think, competitive sports like that are a sin. So I do. I think there's some value to it. And I think people who turn it into a sin are just trying to explain why they're not out there just destroying everybody in debates. Because they could. It's just like,
if it wasn't a sin.
Yes, yeah. If it wasn't a sin, I'd just be smoking. I'd be smoking James White on the King James issue. I'd be smoking. It's just no. Just you don't want to do it. That's fine. It's not
for everybody.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And there's people out there. I like to, tell myself I'm an alpha male and all that stuff. But there's people out there in the fighting world. They'd beat the snot out of me. Doesn't mean I'm not a good person, and there's people out there too in a debate. I mean, I do not consider myself a professional debater, but at the same time, I'm confident enough in my position, and I think I present it in a way, and I try to present my position in a way where I'm not locking myself into something.
Yeah, I do like the way you hold your opponent's feet to the fire, though, because I find too many people come into debate to just make friends, and then
Yeah.
they're too soft. See, it can turn sinful again if it's full of strife, if we're too contentious. We should debate in a professional and cordial manner, in a rational way, but that doesn't mean we have to be big softies, right? We can still be aggressive, we can be adamant in our position, and yet still remain cordial and professional at the same time. And I think you nailed it. I didn't even think of this, but a lot of people who would say debate is sinful, they debate from the pulpit. And typically, because the person they're debating against is not present, then it's actually more aggressive than it would be if they were just
Mm.
having a discussion.
Oh
So it
yeah.
could actually be more sinful, I guess, quote unquote, if it's from the pulpit or just response videos. Response videos can be more time consuming,
Mm.
anyways, than just agreeing to a 2-hour session where you have a discussion. That's why I'm thankful for people who I would even disagree with. Like right now, we have many great pastors like yourself, Pastor Matt First, Scott Clem, and then those on the other side like Kirby Tab, Brother Kirby, and just a lot of people that are willing to have these discussions. And they always end up being edifying, in my opinion. And they're always done in a professional manner. Sure, it might get heated here and there, but that's why we shake hands at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think you nailed it too, because a boxer, a professional boxer, whoever he's boxing, they've agreed to box,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not going door to door challenging people who don't want to box.
Right.
So there's a difference there.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. So you've provided the ring. You're calling it the
Mm,
debate octagon last night.
yeah.
And and there's people stepping up and saying, "Hey, I'd like to get in that octagon, and I want to fight this battle." And I do. I think it's edifying.